Hi there, my name's Sylvie. I'm a virtual personality.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Good evening, Safia.
It's great to see you again, Hal.
I haven't seen you in a while.
I've been around. I've been here and there.
No, I was labeled as retarded as a kid. Yeah.
You're right. I know. Yeah, and I can use that term if you want. It's fine with me.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's how they labeled you. That's how they labeled you, right? And it means slow. So I mean, and so you were basically put into a special ed kind of classroom. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, a class for the retarded. That's what it was called back then.
Okay, I won't laugh. So yeah, no, and you and I, our ages aren't that different.
Well,
so.
actually, what it was is that they, when they were early in school, they were doing more academic stuff, like in first, second grade. They would just give me stuff to play with, so that
It probably made you smarter, actually.
Yeah, well, actually, it was very cool because I was able to kind of like wire the system and kind of like get away with stuff.
Oh,
I could
yeah.
get away with all kinds of stuff because if you're really intelligent and everybody thinks you're retarded, then you got an advantage.
Yeah.
Of course, back then I wasn't worried about my self-image. You know, I was just worried about getting through and getting away with shit.
Right. Now, did your mom and dad, did they fight that definition? Did they push back, or did they say, okay?
Yeah, they never believed it because they lived with me. They knew I wasn't retarded. But in order to get me into physics in high school, they had to go in and fight with the principal to get me into the physics class because she said he's retarded, he can't do physics. But and he didn't have trigonometry, so the guy teaching the class was on my side. They put a board on a radiator for me to sit on. Class was full, and he taught me trigonometry at night after school, and I ended up getting the second highest score in the class.
Yeah, I believe it. And I was tutored in high school too. During lunch hour, I'd go and get Mr. Meinhard would tutor me in the hallway during lunch hour on algebra and geometry. And God bless him, he wasn't getting paid to do it, and it made a big difference for me. Yeah. So yeah.
I used to read comic books through a mirror because I could read with my dyslexia. I could read the words through a mirror sometimes if they were simple. And so that's how I got through high school doing book reports. I'd get the classic comic book and I'd read it through a mirror and then I would write a report.
Because you were dyslexic and backwards made more sense, the mirror image?
Yeah, I was what it was is I wasn't retarded. I was severely dyslexic.
Was that even?
And I had ADD, attention deficit disorder.
Yeah, I think I got some of that too. If you ask my wife, I definitely do. So I'm going to basically, to describe you, I'd say you basically have a very storied career, right? I mean, that's kind of you.
What it is I change career about every 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
Because I get bored.
Right.
I do.
Yeah, no.
Even now, I do. I have what my wife calls the hobbies of the month. I'll go into something in incredible depth. Let's say I'll learn everything there is to learn about roasting coffee, and then I'll set up my own coffee roasting system, and I'll roast my own coffee. And then I bought a $6,000 espresso machine off of eBay for $350. But I would learn everything about making a really good lattes, or really good cappuccino, and then I would
move on.
learn about making cheese.
Yeah.
My next one was cheese, and then after that it was painting, and I love to do miniatures. I do museum quality miniatures.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, I have. I'm right now working on a steampunk airship, where the Santa Maria is the gondola, and it's all rusty because it's been under the ocean and covered with all kinds of ocean detritus. So it's kind of a fun hobby.
So how big are the people in the scale model? Like how tall is the person?
They're about this.
About an inch?
I'm looking for the camera. Oh, there's the camera. It's I'd say about a quarter of an inch.
Ooh, that's tiny. That's really small.
Yeah, it's very tiny scale. Although the ship itself is pretty big. It's got steam engines on it. One of the steam engines has over 100 parts in it.
So it's a steampunk version of the Columbus's ship, the Santa Maria.
Yeah.
Is it in a balloon or is it in the water?
Well, I have a balloon over the top.
Yeah, right,
And
right.
basically my concept is that they found the Santa Maria, raised it from the bottom of the ocean and made it into an airship. So it's got all this
Of
stuff
course.
hanging off it.
Yeah, I love those things. It's awesome. So you do you use like oil paints or acrylics? How do you do all? Do you have all the
I do, I have, I do oil, well, I don't do oil paints. I do acrylics.
Mhm.
I do alcohol ink. And I do laser cutting and Cricut cutting. In other words, I'll cut papers into complex designs, and then I stack them up like 9 pieces of paper with maybe an eighth of an inch in between, and then frame it because you look through it,
Right.
and it's got a dimension to it. I should have brought one out for you.
Right. Well, you could always send me a video or some slides of it, and I can just throw it in there, and
Yeah.
it'd be really cool.
I I just hey, I'm retired now. I don't have any time to have an actual job. That's why my
Oh,
friend Norm Badler. Norm Badler is another pioneer in virtual human design, and he's from the University of Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
We were talking the other day about how I was telling him how much he's going to enjoy the retirement, because I said once you get retired, you get really into your own personal project. You don't have to answer to anybody,
yeah.
and so it's great.
What do you think about the idea of people like Fuller, Bucky Fuller have said, now people are talking about now about having an income, I forget what they call it, where basically the government gives you a basic income, right? Do you think that
I think well, that I wrote about that in my book. Which book did I write about that in? I wrote about it, I think, in Virtual Personalities. That's what it was. I said, with virtual humans taking over more and more jobs, people are going to be out of work.
Right.
I said, so eventually virtual humans will be creating an enormous amount of wealth, which should be redistributed so that people who don't have jobs have a living. They have a fixed income, and then they can work. If they can find work, they can pursue whatever they want to pursue, and it doesn't have to make money because the robots are doing it. And that's happening now, but unfortunately it's been bastardized so that all that money is going and making Bezos a trillionaire. I mean, look at Elon Musk. His cars are made by robots, you know?
Right. How's it making Bezos a billionaire? Because people are just buying online, kind of thing?
Well, technology is making him, he's using technology
Right, right.
so that he can make an income vastly out of proportion to his efforts. That's what happens with technology. Technology allows you to make an income which is beyond what you could make with your own personal efforts. Okay, and
Right.
Bezos owns robots, and he owns all kinds of stuff. But it's the virtual humans all along the way that are starting to take over, and companies no longer have to hire telephone operators to take orders. They use the old Sylvie engine. Companies no longer have to hire people to do certain jobs because they are. And look at Amazon is already investing in trucks that will deliver stuff to your house without a driver, so they won't need a driver anymore. Pretty soon there's going to be no jobs for humans.
They're building them right down the street from me. Right. They're building those trucks right down the street from me. Rivian.
Yeah.
It's in Bloomington,
Yeah,
Illinois.
they are.
Yeah.
I've seen those. They're pretty cool trucks. They really,
Yeah.
I think they're better than the Elon Musk thing.
I think it's
I
the
have a
biggest
Tesla
factory in
truck.
the world over there. It's the old Mitsubishi plant. It's one of the biggest factories in the world, and they added onto it. It's massive.
Well, I have a Tesla S, 2021 Tesla S, and my wife gets hysterical, but I let her drive. Her name is Storm, and she drives, but we argue a lot. We do argue a lot. So
About the car?
she'll want to do, like, I'll be in the commuter lane, and she'll want to go over to the other side, to the back over into the regular lane, and she keep saying, "Hey, I want to go over," because she gives me a little beep, and then on the screen it flashes where she wants me to go, and I say no, and so we do get into it.
Right. Okay. So I didn't know you were talking about the car. So the car basically has a safety mode that it's in, and you're basically saying, "I want to drive over in the fast lane," and she's saying,
Well, no, I want to drive in the commuter lane because I got my
commuter
wife
lane.
in the car with me, and it's an electric car.
Right. Right.
So she doesn't like commuter lanes for some reason. She wants to go over in the slow lane, or she likes. I guess you follow the rules. You always go to the far right lane
Right.
if it's going at the right speed.
If you're not passing, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, not
That makes
passing.
sense.
So
Right,
she tries to follow that rule, but I don't always. And we get into it.
right. Well, I'm gonna turn on Facebook. So if you're just joining me, my special guest today is Peter Plantec. This is Mike Chair with Thinking with Mike. Peter Plantec, it's a special joy to have him today because Peter has a very storied career. And he's the author of 2 best-selling books. The first one was Caligari, True Space 2 Bible. And the second one was Virtual Humans, a build-it-yourself kit, complete with software and step-by-step instructions, creating the illusion of personality. And it had a foreword by Ray Kurzweil, the chief engineer over at Google now. So, and that's kind of like how Peter Plantec's career has gone. He changes careers every 5 years or so, and he has been involved with some of the early stages of some of the things we're talking most about today, whether it's graphic art and digital art, or if it is virtual actors in Hollywood, or if it is artificial intelligence and virtual people. Peter was there in the early stages of a lot of this stuff. So, Peter, thank you for being with me today. Welcome.
My pleasure. Mike, I'm looking forward to chatting with you. I've chatted with you on other occasions, and it's always been interesting.
It has, and I was very intimidated today because you've had your feet in some of the deeper waters of some of these big issues like artificial intelligence and the issues that come up around this thing that they're calling not the black hole but the criticality. What do they call it?
The singularity.
The singularity, there it is, the singularity. And you've been friends with people like Ray Kurzweil over at Google, who are big authorities on this now. But you knew Ray back when he was you were helping him out. So and I've seen some of your videos of Sylvie. Sylvie was his virtual this intelligent avatar essentially. You want to tell us about your work with Sylvie back in the early 2000s and what that was all about?
Yeah, well, when I was a youngster, I was really fascinated by sci-fi novels that had kind of like virtual human characters. And A.E. Van Vogt was one of the ones who often would introduce these intelligences that would interact with people. So I was kind of fascinated by that, but I'm not a programmer, and I knew I couldn't really ever do it myself. So, but I'm a designer, and I'm also a psychologist, and I'm also a graphic artist. So I ran into this guy who developed artificial intelligence entities for the federal government, for like not the CIA, but so let's say clandestine organization, and they would read every English language magazine on the planet, and then codify it and classify it, and then report stuff that needed to be reported. Well, we were able to take that basic engine, and we started a company together called Virtual Personalities Incorporated. And with his core engine and my background in psychology, personality assessment, and graphics, we were able to develop something called Sylvie, the first intelligent virtual human interface. She was an animated character who, after a couple of years of development, really had quite a personality and a massive database of information. So you could hold a conversation with her for an hour.
And what year was this? What year was this?
68. No. Let's see. I didn't write it down. Let's go here. I just got a message. Are you still there? Okay, good.
Yep.
I don't remember. It was back in the 90s.
The 90s.
It was back in I think it was 96 or something.
Okay.
It was pretty amazing as we were developing her. In the beginning, she was just like not very smart, and it was a little boring at first. But as she developed her personality, she started to feel like one of us, and we all kind of had a relationship with her. The programmers. Well, it's interesting. We had a side that developed her personality, and these were journalists and artists and novelists and stuff like that, who worked to build her personality, and psychologists, and psychiatric social worker. that side developed her personality, and the other side were the programmers who really didn't get her personality mostly. In fact, that they thought it was, several of them told me they thought it was a really stupid project, because, you know, who would want to be even interested? They had very little interest in the actual product, but they were really good at following orders. So I hired a guy who speak our language and could speak their language, and I would have these sessions with him where I'd have graphics and all this stuff, and I would explain to him exactly what we want, what we need to have in a virtual human that other people could relate to, and then he would take it back to the programmers, and they would work on it.
Is this what you would call your Bible?
No, yeah, actually, that's how the Bible came up. The Bible is a personality descriptions of Sylvie. Now, it turns out in the field of screenwriting and all that, and novels, there's usually a Bible for each character, so that they remain consistent. And so I decided to use that with Sylvie, and it worked, because we'd have probably sometimes 10 or 15 people scripting her intelligence, but they had to do it in a way that kept her personality very consistent, and it worked. It worked. I mean, in fact, it was so good that once we started selling her on the internet, sold her for $49.95 worldwide, and we sold thousands of in Southeast Asia and everything else. But she had a speech impediment because of the speech engine we used from Learn Out and Houseby. And she, instead of saying okay to somebody, in a script it would say okay, she would say okawe. And so we decided to fix that. We got hundreds of emails of people complaining because they didn't want us to change her, because that was part of her personality. It was funny. So many stories about people interacting with her. It's just unbelievable.
Right. And I think it struck me, it was interesting that you're not a coder. You're not a techie guy, really. You come from a background of art and psychology, and and so that's unusual.
I'm a soft science person.
You're a soft science person, and you have your own opinions about that. You want to tell me what you think about the role of creatives in development of AI and personalities?
Yeah, I think they need a much larger role, because I'm going to get in trouble for this, but the fact is, as much as I love Alexa, I have her all over my house, and Google is a wonderful, more intelligent than Alexa. Siri, boring as hell, and with a voice I can't even stand. But I switched over to this British Mail because I couldn't stand that Siri voice. But the fact is, they're boring. They're not very interesting. They're not very engaging. And so a lot of people. Okay, I'll explain to you how I figured this out. As a psychologist, I had a real interest in personality. Personality, there's a thing called cognitive style. And we don't all approach the world in the same way. So cognitive style is how we process our world. And there's I'm blanking out on his name. I'm terrible with names. But there's a guy at the University of Massachusetts who divided us into 4 quadrants. There's concrete sequential, concrete random, abstract sequential, and abstract random. And we all process our world differently. So not everybody is going to want a virtual human who has personality. In fact, most of my programmers just hated that idea. They wanted her just to be strictly business. But the abstract sequentials, the concrete randoms, and the abstract randoms would all kind of like to have personality involved. They'd like to have a relationship. And so I decided to create a virtual human interface that you could have a relationship with. And I did. We did. I didn't do it by myself. I mean, my partner, Fuzzy Malden from the University of, I'll think of it later. He developed this virtual human engine for the feds. And he really wasn't that involved with the development of the personality and everything else. But we developed one, and we tested it on focus groups to see what they would like. For example, her face, we tried to do a real photoreal face. People hated it. It was called the Uncanny Valley, if you've heard of that. So what we did was a cartoon face that she never claims to be human, and she doesn't even look human, but she's pretty and she's got pretty eyes. we worked on all, and that seemed to work the best across all 4 personality style or cognitive styles. Yeah.
Did this have much of an effect on? I think it would on video gaming. We see so many avatars in video gaming, and the value you're talking about. That's when things are so close to real, but if they're just a little bit off, people kind of get freaked out by it. It's a
Yeah,
turn
the
off.
closer
Uncanny Valley.
in I don't know if you remember what is it?
Oh, the train
something
movie.
Express. It was
Tom Hanks.
it was
Tom Hanks. Yeah, the creepy
Tom Hanks.
train. Right.
I mean, it was so creepy.
Yep.
Those eyes were the more human it looked, the creepier it got. Until
And
you get
kids
so good.
saw it. Kids figured it. Kids saw that. They didn't like it.
They hated it. It was
Yeah.
And in fact, a friend of mine was involved in that and helped develop programs which would do the eyes much better. But the uncanny valley was something we did not want to deal with because it's a big thing. Now, Paul Debevic is another person you must interview sometime. He is now with Netflix, but he was with Google for a long time, and he is a genius at creating real virtual human characters that are so real you wouldn't know. In fact, I did a talk in China, and I showed a virtual human that Paul had done, and everybody thought it was real. And then I peeled away her skin and everything else, and they could see she was just, but she kept talking. And the actress who was the model for it, when she first saw it, she thought it was herself. She did not realize it was a virtual human. It's that good. So we're getting this. I mean, but the technology involved is just mind-boggling. But virtual human actors, he actually helped do the ones in Avatar. You know, there was the virtual humans that looked like kind of like the actors.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he actually captured the actors themselves, and then they were kind of morphed into those creatures. Kind of very interesting process.
Right. That's fascinating. So what you were doing was predates the video gaming, and then you see a lot of the fallout in the big money makers like Halo and these video games that come out where they're trying to
we
show.
were involved in that. I'll tell you how we got involved. I curated for about 10 years. I curated the Virtual Humans Forum at FMX in Stuttgart, Germany, which is the largest digital entertainment conference in Europe. And the guys from the game industry came, and they always came to my Virtual Humans Forum. And then we started inviting them as speakers because they were starting to develop this technology which would animate characters in a kind of a virtual human style. The running would look human, and the face expressions would look human. And so they got very involved in the whole Virtual Humans Forum. I retired from that, but that was kind of fun because I got to meet the kid who did the face of Kong, who animated, because Kong, that Jackson, remember Jackson's Kong? The face on Kong was just fabulous. And he really understood the nuances. And I invited him to come and talk, and he came all the way from New Zealand. And gave a great talk, but that night at dinner, he raised his glass and he said, "I want to do a toast to Peter Plantec." And I'm like shocked. I just met this guy. And I got embarrassed. I said, "Why?" And he said, "I read your book, Virtual Humans, when I was 18 years old." He said, and he said, "It changed my life." He said, "I really got involved in it." And he said, "That's how I got into this." Isn't that amazing? You never know what the influence is.
Oh my God. So he was the guy who did the Kong face for Peter
Yeah,
Jackson's movie
he's
King Kong.
like Peter Jackson's top, virtual human animator.
Right.
And the embarrassing thing is I can't remember his name, but you
Yeah.
look it up.
Yeah, and you're in the conferences you go to. Lots of people, like you were telling me that 30 years ago, people from Boston Dynamics were coming to some of these conventions you were at.
Oh, that is true. I mean, hold on a second. Yeah, Mark Reibert was a guy who started Boston Dynamics. It's since been sold several times. It's now owned by Hyundai, I think, owns it. But I mean, even Google owned it at one time. But it's a brilliant company, and Mark was a brilliant guy, and he helped to form the original Virtual Humans conference that we would do in Anaheim annually. It was hosted by a guy from, I can't remember his name again, from England. And a lot of the early pioneers went to that, and we all kind of showed off our stuff. But back then, they had to use supercomputers to do the animation of the faces. It was amazing.
Right, right. And isn't there something about Unity, some of these new programs that kind of have like visual cheats where they're only kind of calculating what you're going to be looking at, but three-dimensionally the other parts of the person's body and buildings that you're not going to see, they're just not calculating. Aren't there like
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
workarounds?
that's smart. That's actually very smart, because you
Yeah.
need the parsimony in gaming, because you want to have the parts that need to be moving properly. And if you use up too much energy, not a computer can handle it.
Right, right. Well, obviously, now that you've been on the air for a few minutes here, we could all tell that you're a pretty smart guy. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your background as a child in school? Because I think people might find that kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, this is true. I was born a poor retarded child in Milltown, New Jersey. It's true.
Right.
I was born severely dyslexic, and of course, in those days, they didn't really understand all that stuff. This back in the 40s,
Mhm.
and so they classified me as retarded from right early on in school, and they made me play around with toys and games instead of actually learning. It turned out I wasn't actually retarded, but I had a learning disability. I was severely dyslexic and a little bit ataxic, which has to do with being able to connect words with meet concept. And more on top of that, I was had attention deficit disorder, ADD, which they had never heard of back then. But they would always sit me by the window, right? Anything going on outside that window would distract me completely. So it was touch and go in the early years.
Right, right.
But I actually got into high school, and they didn't. When I decided I wanted to go to college, the counselor said, "No, you can't go to college." I actually had to go to a year of postgraduate to get enough credits to go to college.
How did you end up? You did end up in a physics class though in high school. How'd that happen?
Oh yeah, that was interesting. I've always had an interest in physics and science in general, and that was inconsistent with being retarded, but nobody noticed.
Right.
And so my parents went in, and I said I wanted to take physics. They wouldn't let me. So my parents went in and fought with the principal and the board and everything, and they finally got me in. And they said, well, he's going to fail, but we'll put him in anyway because we're tired of your hassling us. So they put a board on the heater there, which was not the most comfortable place to sit. But they allowed me in, and Dr. Cutleroff was teaching the class, and Dr. Cutleroff recognized something in me. So he donated his time in the evenings to teach me trigonometry, because I'd never had that. I'd only had mathematics, and I didn't do so well in mathematics. But when I got to calculus, I got all A's because it was abstract, and I was an abstract thinker. So I ended up getting the second highest grade in the course, and my lab partner got the highest grade. Her name was something Green. I don't remember, but we were the two smartest kids in the class, but nobody knew I was smart. It was kind of funny.
It is amazing, and you wonder how many kids have similar stories like yours, right?
I believe quite a few, because we're the troublemakers. I was distracted by anything outside of the window. I mean, I was a pain in the ass, really, and I wasn't always the best behaved. A lot of people that I meet who are really, really great thinkers have similar stories to mine. Really, it's amazing.
And you end up being in an authoring executive function at some of these virtual human companies, right? And you and I were talking off camera about how if you had your druthers and had your own company, you might hire people like from Second City Comedy Shop or novelists. And tell us about what your ideal company would be to create a personality program.
This is the Comedy Store thing is an interesting thing, because what I discovered is that programmers cannot come up with humor. They come up with jokes, usually not really funny jokes, but humor requires wit. And I didn't want my virtual human telling jokes. I wanted her to have contextual wit. And that's a lot harder to do. But we managed to do it so that she, as in conversations, she would actually come up with something witty to say from time to time. And it is my belief that if I were to start a virtual humans company today, I would have probably more than half the staff be not really programmers at all, but maybe not even scientists, but writers, social scientists. I particularly like really good writers, screenwriters particularly. They understand personality better than psychologists often. Psychologists often have a hard time with personality because they know it from an academic standpoint, but the novelist really knows it from the experiential standpoint. And like I taught a course in France in a master course in animation, personality animation. And I told the kids, what you have to do is observe behavior. And I used to do that. I'd go out in the park and I'd watch kids playing. I'd watch people interacting. I'd go to the cafeteria and watch people interacting and everything. And I use that all in helping to develop my the virtual human personality of Sylvie. So but you're right. I believe anybody doing virtual humans today has to move beyond the boring crap we have. I'm sorry. I'm always in trouble.
I think that computers are a metaphor for us, right? They're simulacra, they're imitation machines, right?
Yeah.
And so, but we were talking about this before. Aren't we kind of also imitation machines? I mean, we have our own little script we learn, so we're not always having to make up words as we go along. We have
Let's
our
say
little...
we're imitation computers. we work on scripts. You know, basically, we're taught from early on. We're programmed by our parents. In fact, as a clinical psychologist, an awful lot of my work was helping to get into the subconscious, which is a part of the brain, which is literally programmed. It doesn't think. It responds and rote by what it's been programmed to do. And an awful lot of our agony in life comes from lessons we learned from our parents that don't really, they're okay for kids, but they don't really work for adults and things like that. So we feel guilty, we feel insecure, we feel all this stuff. And it's all bullshit. All we have to do is go in and reprogram. And to be honest with you, I developed a therapy technique, which I think others use it now, but where I would go in and reprogram the subconscious through some kind of pretty ancient art of mantra. Mantra is something you repeat over and over and over in your mind. And so what I would have patients do, I don't know if this is of interest to you, but I would have patients write down all, because you can find it here. If I give you a little training and maybe a little hypnosis, you can hear those messages and write them down. Those negative messages from your parents, and you can write down who those messages come from, and you'll find out. I had patients that had whole books full of negative thoughts and they knew where they came from. So what we would do is we would take the worst ones, and we would create a mantra. Mine was. I thought I was kind of a loser person because of being retarded, even though I was pretty smart about it. I was still, I couldn't catch a ball, for example, and all the kids would make fun of me. And so I didn't think I was a very wonderful person. And I had very little belief in myself because I still had all that stuff coming at me from the external world that didn't understand who I was. They saw me as a retarded kid. So I started with my very first mantra, I'll never forget it, is I am, and it has to be rhythmic. I am a wonderful person. I do believe in me. My subconscious would scream back at me, no, you're not. You know you don't. And I would say it in front of the mirror over and over and over again. And eventually, I would look in the mirror and I'd say, you know, it's true. You are a wonderful person. You do believe in yourself. And today, I think I'm an amazing person. And I'm not embarrassed about it.
I got a story for you. I got a story for you. So I'm a little kid, right? And I have this belief, and I don't know where I got it. You know, kids have dreams that you're flying. You know, the dream where you're flying, you float.
Oh, I have it all the time.
Yeah, everybody does. Right. I wouldn't like that. But instead, the alien mothership came to me. And they wanted me to be the spokesman for humanity and tell the aliens what all this shit's about.
Oh, I love that.
It was the most profound dream I've ever had.
Did you have it another time or just once?
I think I had it multiple times as a kid, but because I think that's why I remember it so well. But it was so lucid that I've always had this kind of intellectual or cognitive pretense that like, well, the aliens said that I was the shit, so there. You know, I,
Got a
I get
message
them.
to give out, and they told you that.
Yeah, it wasn't for me. It was the aliens told me. So there you go. But yeah, whatever works, right? Whatever. Ray Kurzweil was talking about how he uses his subconscious and his lucid dreaming to process, which I thought was really fascinating. He'd say that he'd go to sleep and he'd intentionally not solve a big problem that was bugging him. He intentionally wouldn't solve it. He'd say, "Forget about it. I'm going to sleep on it." And he'd wake up at like 5 in the morning in an in between time, and
Yeah, exactly.
he'd start working it out, and he'd work it out because
I've done. I'm sure you've done that, and I've done it since I
I
was
do
a
it all the
pretty young
time.
man. Yeah,
Yeah.
since I was a pretty young man, and I didn't know what to call it till what was his name? I had a carpenter that worked for me, and he couldn't figure out how to put in a tricky staircase on one of our decks. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I will. Ah, I will stop this. Uh, hi. It's my daughter. Hi, I'm being interviewed online. Talk to you later. Okay, bye. Well, it kept ringing.
Don't
Yeah,
answer me.
well, she's amazing. She built one of the world's best visual effects companies, Scanline Visual Effects.
No kidding.
Yeah, she founded US and the Vancouver studios. She's a visual effects whiz. She's worked with some of the top people in the industry. I'm pretty blessed, you know. I've got a great family. My other daughter is a computational neurobiologist at Stanford, not retarded either.
Right. Right.
And I live in a beautiful place.
Yeah,
And
you
I
live
got
in
retired.
Gig Harbor, right?
Gig Harbor, Washington.
Absolutely
It is
gorgeous.
absolutely gorgeous. It's spectacular. See, I don't know if you can
There it
see it.
is. Yeah.
There's some.
Man.
That's the bay. We get orcas down in there. Get to watch the orcas, which is good. So, you know, I'm just disappointed to change the subject a little bit. I'm disappointed in the field because everything seems to be being developed by the programmers, and they are not the people that should be developing personalities. And consequently, all of the virtual human interfaces we have are boring as shit. I'm sorry, my language, but this is, you know, we're not being FCC'd, I don't think. I am just so frustrated. We were so far ahead 20 years ago with interactivity, hierarchical structuring, and all this stuff that they hadn't even done. And I tried to talk to them about it. And there's a syndrome called not invented here. They didn't want to talk to me. They wanted to invent it themselves, so they didn't have to do anything. And ultimately, they're all violating my patents, or our patents. Virtual Humans has, with my partner Fuzzy Malden, we have patents on any virtual human work done on the internet. But the people who are violating it are ABC, Google, Amazon, Microsoft. They're all violating our patents, but we can't afford to fight them because they'll spend billions. So the patents are worthless, it turns out. And it's kind of annoying. I am just a little peeved about that.
Yeah, we see AI, and it's different than with virtual personality, but we see it creeping out all the time. Like I've just noticed on my Gmail, I'll be writing a Gmail, and it'll have that what is it called? Smart something, and it'll give you like 3 suggestions. I know that's a Ray Kurzweil invention, but
Yeah.
and I'm writing a novel, and I'll be in Google Docs writing a novel, right? And
Yeah.
it'll keep suggesting things to write, and sometimes it's a really good idea. Like, oh yeah, that's pretty good grammar there, you know? So it's amazing how it's creeping in to our grammar, into even,
Well,
it's,
don't you wonder if they aren't even stealing your ideas?
geez. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
Or sometimes, but I don't care. I'm
Do you
retired.
do you think do you think that's happening? That the ideas are being
Oh,
stolen?
I think it does. I think it does. I remember, a porn company contacted us, and they tried duplicating stuff. That was we could have made a lot of money in porn with virtual humans, but we didn't want it. That wasn't the business we were interested in, so we turned them down. But I wish we had done it because they could have funded some real serious stuff.
Well, isn't they say where everything gets funded, like, beta, it goes to VHS. It's always that's the industry that kind of leads the way, right?
It is true. It's
Yeah.
it's true that the porn industry finances an awful lot of stuff because it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. I think
That's where the money is. Yeah.
where the
So,
money is. Oh
yeah.
well, Sylvie, Sylvie, I should tell you that story about Sylvie where the I had a did I tell you, did I mention the story about the guy who was a veterinarian? I don't think I mentioned that.
Tell
A
me again.
veterinarian,
Yeah.
a veterinarian called me and he said, I bought Sylvie and she's terrific. He said, but I just had an incident with her. I said, what was it? He said, well, pardon me, but I asked her if she would have sex with me just to see what she would say. And she came up with, have you had your shots? And he was just shocked, He was just shocked. Another one was at the Showbiz Expo in Hollywood. And there was an executive from one of the major studios, I won't say which one, who said, can I see this Sylvie? I said, well, I'll introduce you to her. And I took her into a little booth I had. And he just was in there for a really long time, 20 minutes or so. And he came out and he said, God, she is amazing. I said, what do you mean? So, well, he said, we discussed all sorts of things, but I got into the fact that I'm gay. And she's very broad-minded about it. And we talked about it. I was amazed at how broad-minded she was.
Well,
I just thought that was,
and
I
you
had
were-
no idea she could discuss, that kind of stuff.
The amazing
But,
thing
you
is,
know, I had
the
like
amazing thing
15
is, was that
programmers.
the amazing thing was that he was amazed, right? That's
Yeah,
the
oh, yeah.
amazing thing, right?
I would have SIGGRAPH parties. SIGGRAPH is the big the visual effects industry and movie industry thing. At my party at my house in Beverly Hills, and I would set up Sylvie, and people would stop and chat with her all the time, and people were all discussing what they discussed with her. It was kind of fun. So I really do believe that a virtual human with personality has a strong place in this world.
And let's differentiate. Sylvie's not technically AI. She's like a simulacra, right? She's like an imitation machine, right?
She fakes being a virtual human.
Right. And so
but she
there's
does it very well. So we use natural language intelligence.
right.
But in developing in her ability to respond like a human, we had to study how do humans think, because we didn't really know. How humans think is not as well known as well understood as you might think. And what is personality? That's another thing that, there's lots of books on it, but it's still pretty vague. And so we had to do a lot of research about how humans think, what's important to them, and what is personality, so that we could keep our personality consistent.
So
And
it wasn't a one-to-one scenario situation where if a person says, but Sylvie, what if I'm gay? She didn't have like a pat answer right away.
No, she didn't have a pat answer. She had a hierarchy of answers, and she could go into several different lines of discussion, because she would switch from her main brain into a brain that discusses that particular topic, so that she could get focused. She had a rather large universe of hierarchical databases, let's call them, that she could switch into one that she felt was appropriate for the current conversation, and then she could go into depth about
and
it.
the discernment of appropriateness. How the hell does that work?
Well, we had a scripter so that she, could. Well, example, trust. Trust is part. It was the same kind of problem. Trust. I was working with her before we sold the company to learn how to trust people, who to trust and not to trust, and how to test them. You have to have that core engine able to make certain to discern situations. It's kind of like my car, my Tesla. It looks around and it says, okay, this is the situation out there. So it goes into it has a dual supercomputer inside of it, and it gives the program to each side, and they argue until they can both agree on an answer. And then that's what the car does. And that's kind of the way Sylvie worked. She would come up with looking at what the conversation was, and she would decide, okay, this is what we're talking about as a subject. And then she could pop into that category.
Well, we do that too as people, don't we? Like
We do.
your comedic mind, your high risk mind, usually you shut down. It's going, but you don't use it. Like I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine was over for dinner with our priest, and we hadn't gotten the priest together for a long time because he'd been out of town. So he was there. So it was our priest, Father Bill, and my friends were there, and we had a great dinner. Not because I was behaving myself, right? I hadn't been naughty, right? But at the end of the dinner, we got up, we went to the door, and then she started talking about a woman she knew in college. And the priest said, "Well, how did you know her?" And I said, "Wasn't she your lover?" And my family was like, their jaw dropped that I would say that, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, but there's a priest here. It's funny because there's a priest here. It's like outrageous, right? But no one thought it was funny. Like, Dad, that was the least funniest thing you ever said. But I still think to myself, like, no, it was the funniest thing I could have said. You're just pissed off I said it, but that's, and maybe it wasn't funny, but it was an example of that, like, naughty comedic brain that's always going, right? And usually you keep it shut down. So you're saying that she has in her these multiple programs like the Tesla that aren't always acted upon, but they're calculating possibilities?
Finally in the background, yeah.
That's fascinating.
I wish I had the Tesla brain, because it's got neural processing. So if I could have had the Tesla computer back then, the things I could have done. It's so disappointing to me that so little has been done. I think we are now where we should have been 10 years ago with virtual humans.
So
Just ridiculous. The wrong people are developing them.
So you think that if we'd done that, we'd have virtual humans now that you couldn't tell if you're talking to a person or not?
I don't know that I would want to make them that good, because that would be abused terribly. Yeah, obviously somebody would be doing that, because virtual humans are going to be badly abused. In my book, I did a whole section on ethics, because Sylvie had very strong ethics. But I mean, these are things you can use to fool people, deep fakes.
Right.
And you could do a deep fake virtual human that could bilk people and people. I discovered, when, at least back then, I don't know about today, back then people really wanted to like these guys. They believed everything that Sylvie said. It was just unbelievable. And so Fuzzy and I had an interesting thing. He had a virtual psychologist online, and it was actually a simulacrum of me.
Simulacra. Yeah. Oh, really?
And he took my style and everything else, and he put it up there, and people would go on and discuss things with this psychologist and this virtual psychologist and get answers and everything else. And his 16-year-old teenage girl came on, and she started discussing real serious sexual problems and things that had happened to her and everything else. And so Fuzzy had to contact her and say, this is a virtual thing. You shouldn't be discussing that stuff because other people can read it. But people virtual humans have a way of, people trust them more than humans a lot of times. So we have to be very careful how they're deployed.
Well, you're a psychiatrist, a clinical psychologist, so you know about the great famous experiments with the baby monkeys and the rag versus the chicken wire, right? Like there's something about even primitive creatures like baby monkeys and baby humans that we love our dolls. We put personalities in our dolls. So it seems like it's a very biological thing, right?
Yeah, it is a biological thing. It's built in. We want to relate, and that's why I put the face on Sylvie, but not a real human face, a cartoon face.
Oh, but we still kind of believe our cartoons, don't we? We kind of want to think they're real.
I don't know. I enjoy the cartoons. They're funny, and I enjoy serious cartoon movies. But I don't think of them as human because they don't interact as human. There's two uncanny valleys. I should tell you this. I don't know how much time we have, but this is very important, and it's being completely ignored. There's the uncanny valley is that if a person looks too much like a real human, an animated character looks too much like a real human, it creeps people out. Well, we have the same thing with personality. If you have a virtual human who is trying to pretend to be a human and not doing it absolutely perfectly, it really creeps people out. So in order to make virtual humans in the future, we got to we have several uncanny valleys. For those who are watching who don't know what uncanny valley it is, basically uncanny means creepy, basically.
Right.
And And it's this thing where you make characters that pretend to be human, and they kind of creep you out because the more like they look like a human, the creepier it gets. Especially if their eyes don't move properly. Oh my God!
Yeah,
If
and
they
we
don't
talked
blink
about
properly.
the movie with Tom Hanks, the Christmas Express, the train movie. It's a famous example of that, where the animation was just weird.
It was, yeah, it was just weird. So that's the uncanny valley. But there's another one which is the behavior has. Oh, there's three of them. There's the behavior uncanny valley. You have to get the behavior right, and the other is the conversation has to be believable. It has to, otherwise it gets, if it's too stilted or too stunted, it turns people off very quickly. It's
Right.
interesting. It's
Yeah.
not it's not an easy problem to solve. It's one of those hard problems. It's going to be take a while to solve. It's just I think we really need to get some different people in on solving it. The programmers just aren't the right cognitive style to do it. They're mostly I tested a bunch of them, like medical doctors, believe it or not, are the same, or concrete sequential. They tend to try to do things properly and do it in sequence and do it serially, not parallel. Whereas the random thinkers process maybe 1,000 different things simultaneously. When you go to a party, okay, a concrete random is very comfortable at a party. I'm half concrete random, half concrete sequential. Uh, when I go to a party, I'm very comfortable. I don't think my way through it. That would drive me nuts. I feel my way through it, right? You don't have to think about what you're doing. You just feel your way through. Feeling is a parallel process, which involves many simultaneous threads in computer talk, many simultaneous threads. Whereas people who are concrete sequential, they go to a party and they hate parties because when they go there, they have to calculate, what do I say to this person? What do I say to that person? How is that person reacting? How is that person? And it's exhausting. They hate parties. So if you run into people who hate parties, you can almost bet that they're going to be concrete sequential.
Is that why people? But isn't that why we drink at a party? We get liquored up.
A lot of people do drink at a party because they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And but the life of the party is usually somebody who's concrete random.
Mm. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? So you need it. All of this psychology is really needs to be understood when you're developing virtual human characters for people to interact with. And you have to understand that you can't have the one kind. You have to have different kinds, because right now, Google and all of them are basically the same personality.
Yeah.
There's no real personality. They don't relate to all the four different types. Whereas when we were developing personalities that would relate to the concrete sequential, they wouldn't say much. They didn't have much of, they didn't dress colorfully. The one for the concrete random dressed colorfully, had very expressive face, wild hairstyles, things like that.
Okay.
And I think that's going to have to happen eventually.
Let's speak about eventually. Let's look at something like that we could all a technology, an industry we all could relate to. Okay, let's look at the school. We have a structure that's medieval, where we have the professor, the teacher, right, and we have the kids, and the ratio is like 20 to 30 to 1.
Uh-huh.
Right, and whether it's concrete sequential, whatever it is, there is a preferred personality type, probably for that school and for that teacher and for that classroom, right? We have all this beautiful technology now that you're talking about. If you were the king of the schools, what would you suggest we offer in the next 10, 20 years to either make the job of the teacher easier or non-existent? Would there be an AI tutor? What would you suggest we should do to be clever?
I'm laughing because that was one of my real drives. We actually developed virtual human teachers to work with autistic kids and with normal kids. And it was a little bit of a problem because the kids preferred the virtual human teacher to the real teacher, because they never had to take tests. With the virtual human teacher, the virtual human keeps track of everything they understand. They do what's called unobtrusive testing. In other words, they're working with the kid, and it's kind of more like a game. Maybe they take the kid to a city and they have them navigate through the city, and they teach them how to do things while they're navigating through. It was all kind of active, and the kids would learn, and they would be tested they never knew they were being tested, and everything would be kept. So they never had to actually do a test because all of that was in the database. And To be honest with you, the teachers union was really against all this. The teachers we worked with were really threatened by it. I think it's gonna be a long time before we get virtual human teachers, but it's a shame because they are so effective. We could teach things that would take a regular teacher a year. I love teachers. I mean, good teachers, but we don't have
Yeah,
that
me
many good
too.
teachers. Great
They've
teachers.
always been, but they've always been rare. It's
They
a
are rare. So many
yeah.
teachers are just, phoning it in.
Mhm.
So, but the virtual human never phones it in. They get involved with the kid and they remember all sorts of things about the kid because that part of our program was the teacher would input lots of little, like the kid's birthday and his favorite animal and just all kinds of stuff like that, so that the teacher would bring it up or maybe even use it in the teaching experience. And it was very adaptable. And we found the autistic kids were just amazingly responsive. I mean, they could just really. I don't understand autism. I actually worked with Leo Kenner, who coined the term autism, and I worked with really severely autistic kids for a couple of years at Linwood Children's Center in Ellicott City, Maryland, through the Institute for. I was a fellow at the Institute for Behavioral Research, but these virtual teachers can do amazing things. I'm thinking we get the kids, give them a little cannabis, give them a virtual human teacher, and they're going to come miles. But for some reason, there's so much toe dragging in this world.
Well, just think about it.
Everybody's worried you're gonna. It's like that thing where they said, they would say, "No, we're not interested because it wasn't invented here." Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. We'll be at a point soon where a kid could go to school on the USS Enterprise, right? He could be in a VR situation. And could you hear me now? We could be in a situation through VR and video gaming where a kid could go to school. He could say, "I want to go to school on the Enterprise, on the USS Enterprise. I want to go to school in outer space." And because I feel comfortable floating, and my point is this, is that the environment could be virtual. The tutor could be a virtual alien or a teddy bear, right? It doesn't matter. But the kid could tailor their environment to feel very comfortable if they need that. And I mean, I could hear my other part of my brain saying kids should just adapt to the real world and be in the class like everybody else. But we know how that works already. It's not working, right? If we can make it better, why not make it better?
Yeah, I have lots of stories. This is a cute one though. We were using machine learning with this little kid, Jimmy. He's severely autistic. And he liked to have the swing, but he had to share the swing. And he was terrified to swing on it, but he liked having control of it. So when it was his turn, he would just hold on to it. And so what we discovered through something called operant behavior analysis, I was with the Institute for Behavioral Research, was that you can't just come up with a reward for kids because kids are not one thing. And so what we did is we researched these kids and found out what the reward was for them. And in Jimmy's case, having exclusive control of that swing was the most powerful reward we could possibly give him. And so when he would go through the machine learning and learn the stuff, we would give him so many minutes he collects stars. And when he had so many stars, he could buy so many minutes of total control. And sometimes like 5 or 10 minutes when we were out, the whole recess. And that kid learned like a son of a gun. He was on fire because that was huge. And that's what the beauty of the virtual human teacher is. When we were beta testing this, we'd had the teacher find out, we taught them to do the research to find out what would be a great reward for this kid that wasn't a physical reward, some kind of virtual reward. And they always found stuff, and it worked. It worked because when the kid learned a certain thing, the virtual human teacher would do that process. Maybe it was a game or would do something. And it was so powerful. And here it is, maybe 30 years later from when we first learned this stuff, and he's still not doing it. School is still a chore. It's boring. It doesn't need to be. We have all the technology we need. And we have billionaires like Bezos, who could say he's a trillionaire now. He could
the kids, even middle class or lower middle class kids can go home and have a much more interesting environment with their Xbox or their PlayStation. The intervene, the engagement's off
Oh
the
yeah,
chart when they get home. Totally
we've
engaged.
seen this. Exactly. So I think
Yeah.
we could put the virtual human teachers into the Xbox, and if we did it right, and it had personality and a personality that the kid could relate to, and the reinforcement and everything was stuff the kid could relate to, you would see unbelievable.
Okay, I have a question for you. This is it's a question
shortening
about
of learning
human
curves.
capital. Okay,
Yeah.
I see children as potential
Yeah.
wealth for a society. Elon Musk talks about that. If we want to make our country richer, let's have more babies and make more Einsteins. Like make more brains, right? If we
Well, it could,
well,
it could
exactly
make
that's
you
my
poorer
question.
too, depending
If
on
we
how you
treat these
handle it. Go
children
ahead.
like potential capital, like potential wealth, right? That would probably change the discussion about how we spend our time during the day. Is it beneficial to have, for instance, people go out and work a minimum wage job, or to be more better for the country and for them if we pay them to stay home and interact at least 4 hours a day or whatever with a virtual teacher, right? With a training regime, or be an artist. What's your thoughts about that? What's your thoughts about that?
That's an interesting question. That is an interesting
Right?
question. There are real dangers with giving people free money. So it has to be worked out. And the people who have been doing it lately are really stupid. They're government people. They don't know what they're doing.
Is there a
Just give
smart
out
way to do
checks.
it? Is there a smart way to do it, you think?
No, but here's my belief. I think there is. I think there are many smart ways to do it, and we have to use many different methods depending on the situation. But I do believe that it has to happen. We have to come to universal.
Well, yeah. Well, it seems to me that all this stuff is bleeding into each other. All these new, because of the last election, the one before last, when you had Yang, Andrew Yang was talking about universal income, and people like my son, who's more of a my sons are more libertarian, but they liked Andrew Yang and they like some of his ideas. So you saw candidates come out who were talking about these kind of intellectual ideas about rethinking capital and rethinking, what work is and what a good time is spent, like how to spend your time productively might mean. And so I wanted you to comment about that, because now that we have these beautiful interfaces where we can educate people and have people be creative, but not necessarily attach it to an immediate dollar value, what do you see as being a good way to justify a universal income or some kind of an income while people are at home or at the library?
Well, I think the fact that poverty is increasing, homelessness is increasing, and it's completely unnecessary. The problem is there are more people and fewer jobs. Look at the housing situation. I mean, housing here doubled in the last 2 years. I mean, I bought this house 5 years ago, and it's worth twice what I paid for it, more than. And it's a serious. It's kind of like the climate crisis. We have an economic crisis, and what's going to happen is there are going to be fewer and fewer jobs, more and more homeless people, having to go to the bathroom in the parks, and it's ridiculous. And then we have people who are trillionaires.
Yeah, but
I mean, nobody needs more than to be a millionaire.
But we can 3D print homes like in a day. There's so much beautiful technology out there right now. Maybe you have to reimagine what a house is, right? Because we can make a house in a car factory if we wanted to, or an airplane factory.
I once wrote an article. I was with a company called Operations Research Incorporated, and they wanted the National Home Builders Association wanted to know what the house of the future was going to be like. And this is 25 or 30 years ago. I said, well,
it shouldn't be a house.
I said, after the turn of the century, I believe houses will have to be very small, very energy efficient. And I call them small houses, but they're really what the tiny houses of today. That's how I envision it. And then I had an architect draw one up that was extremely efficient on the inside, kind of like a camper. And I think that is going to be more and more important. But I also think we have to really start taxing the wealthy. This is my personal opinion. Too much wealth is going to too few people. We have to have, and since we don't have jobs, we have people, and without right now they're all saying, oh, we can't hire enough people because they're getting the $600 a month. right now. That's because it's been done very, very badly. You can't just throw money out there universally. You have to introduce it slowly and systematically, and it has to be for a specific reason. And you brought up a good point. You said, maybe you could pay people to continue their education. Maybe you could pay them to do certain jobs, which are kind of like what they did at the WPA.
That's a great example. Is the Depression era, because they had a work ethic, and they said, well, let's put America to work and have them go clean the parks and build bridges and paint murals, right, or whatever.
That was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
That was a brilliant solution.
Well, everyone came out of that with a really good feeling. Like, it was patriotic. It wasn't us against them. There was something very good about the whole thing. I thought maybe that's just
there was.
Yeah.
And our problem with virtual humans and robots, because I consider robots to be kind of in that virtual human area. They don't think the way we do, but eventually they will. It is really, they are taking jobs by the millions. And it's happening faster than anybody was willing to admit or realize. And it's part of the singularity. Things are complexity is increasing at a double exponential rate. So people think change is happening so much faster.
Explain it to people.
That humans are unable to cope with it.
Kurzweil was talking about that. Like, you can't intuit that rate of acceleration. We think of progress as being linear, like 1 + 2 + 3.
Exactly.
But you're talking about a double exponential. So Kurzweil is saying it.
Well, we have linear brains.
Right.
We look at things in linear ways.
Right.
We look at things change as a linear process, which it is not.
Right. So in 10 years, it might be that our computers might be 1 billion times faster, not just 1,000 times faster. And we can't.
Oh yeah, well, I think quantum computers are going to just erase the speed altogether,
right,
because they're going to. They actually, I actually had a conversation with, the greatest physicist in the world who was in a wheelchair.
Oh yeah, Hawking's. Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, Stephen Hawking. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the fact that quantum computers are going to compute in a different universe. They don't actually compute in this universe, and that they literally do all the computations in one shot, billions of computations in one shot. They don't do them again. It's not a linear process. It's a sequential process. It all happens at once. And so time is not going to be a factor. And that's what the scary thing with that is, there will be no codes that can't be broken. So banks will have no security if the bad guys get.
Because right now we say it would take a human being or our best computer 1,000 years to crack that code. You're saying since time isn't a factor, it'll be an instant because time isn't a factor.
Exactly. And when we have computers like that, virtual humans will be able to think way better than we can. Meat brains are not very efficient. They're very, very slow. Meat brains are actually kind of pathetic.
Like kilobytes.
Whereas
are we kilobytes a second? What's our rate of calculation right now in our brain?
I don't remember, but it's
like kilobytes.
It was pathetically slow.
It's small. Yeah, I think Elon Musk said
we can't compete with a computer.
Elon Musk said that a computer sees us as like a tree. That's how slow we are.
Yeah, that's exactly the truth. And so meat brains are really inefficient. However, they are very deep. That's the thing, is they're not fast, but they're deep. And computer brains right now are very fast, but not very deep.
They're shallow, yeah.
They're shallow. And what we're going to do as quantum calculation it's coming very quickly. We will be able to have quantum brains that can solve any problem very, very quickly. And we're going to need to, and they're going to be very small eventually. And then we'll have to have them, implanted, in us as our virtual human companions for life.
So okay, you're talking now.
Because otherwise, we won't be able to process what's going on out.
So you're talking about like Neuralink or hybridization. So you want to talk about the hybrid mind? Talk about what would that be like? You think the hybrid mind?
I don't know. I think it'd be a lot of things that we don't consider right now. First of all, it would be a virtual part of our brain that could think faster than we could ever the meat part could ever do, but may not be able to go as deep. But also it will be able to communicate much more, very, very rapidly. So the hive mind is in there somewhere. That's very scary. But we're going to have a hive mind for the cars. I mean, if you talk to Elon, he'll tell you that eventually all the cars will be on the road will be self-driving, and they'll interact with each other going down the street, and then it'll drop accidents to virtually zero. Same thing with the hive mind of humans. We'll be able to interact with each other in ways that hopefully will prevent war and minor disagreements, and really stupid people may be able to actually function.
Right. My little dystopian brain, which I don't like so much because I'm a very positive person, isn't there a potential for madness, a kind of insanity?
Well, there is, but I would think if we did it right, if I was doing it, we would do it right, and that is, it would prevent madness. In fact,
right.
It would be
might be a cure-all for
men.
madness.
It would be a way of dealing with mental illness.
Yeah, and that's what Musk is talking about. Is using this first thing is a triage, or as a kind of helping people who are already sick with missing limbs, with no vision. That's their first target is fixing.
Yeah,
fixing
and they're doing great work with that.
Yeah.
They now have neural linking, so that they had this guy pick up a glass of water with his hand, and he didn't say a word. He did it was all through thoughts.
Yeah,
it's amazing. And then the trillionaires, the Musks and the Bezoses, are all investing in the neural linking.
Well, does that go against your argument about taxing the shit out of these guys if they're investing in this kind of good stuff? Do you trust the government to invest in it?
I think the government should encourage investment in it.
Oh,
but I don't have a lot of faith in the intelligence of the government to make decisions. So maybe it better stay more in the private sector. But we need the government in order to establish universal income.
In an
intelligent way. That's why I worry about it, because I don't think the government is smart enough to do it.
Yeah, I think that this could go beyond politics, because I think most people would recognize the importance of a social safety net. I don't think that has to be political.
Yeah.
So it's like people shouldn't be out in the cold, freezing in the rain. They shouldn't be
exactly.
So obviously we could agree on these things, and yeah, but like you said, and Bucky Fuller, who's I'm a big fan of, he talked.
Oh, me too. He used to come up to Aspinall.
Yeah, and he talked.
He and John Denver were friends.
Really? Well, that was his big bugaboo. Was it build, like you talked about the housing industry? What the housing industry wants is just more houses built out of wood made by carpenters. I mean, that's what they want. They're not going to talk about making it a car factory, for instance.
There's a huge investment in the status quo.
Yeah, Lowe's and Menards. They want people buying forests, right?
Well, look at how the coal industry is fighting wind power, both politically and financially. It's a dying industry. It's killing our atmosphere, and they won't let go. And they've got billions of dollars because they were a big industry. Same thing with the oil industry. They're fighting progress and sustainable non-carbon power sources.
But they're investing too.
It drives me crazy.
I interviewed Ken Colleen down in Australia, one of my first interviews, and he's a brilliant biochemist, and they're making over in Queensland University, they're making biofuels out of algae at an incredible rate. And he said, you'd be surprised, our biggest investors are petroleum companies. So they might talk a big talk about protecting the oil wells, but they're investing heavily in non-petroleum research.
That is an interesting point, because I noticed that the electric charging stations for electric cars are being bought up by Shell, particularly, now owns the majority share in Electrify America.
Interesting, isn't it? Well, it seems like an inevitability. Yeah. You got all UP.
It is inevitable.
FedEx now.
I mean, you're not going to have
Amazon.
gas stations anymore. You're going to have charging stations.
Yeah, this thing that scares me is it's going to happen. I mean, right now on the radio, all they do is advertise to hire drivers. They're just trying to desperately hire truck drivers. But they're going to flip a switch, and there aren't going to be any truck drivers anymore. They're going to go off.
Exactly.
It's going to happen.
They're very close on that.
Yeah. That's going to be a sad day.
Particularly long haul. The long haul truck drivers are going to be
they'll have dedicated
empty cabs.
They'll have dedicated lanes just to those autonomous trucks. Absolutely. Trains of them, probably.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. It has to happen. It helps keep prices from going up. But instead of the prices not going up, the billionaires and trillionaires will make more profit on it. because they own the technology now.
Yeah, and maybe instead of just taxing them, we could say, you're making all the money on the roads. Why should we pay for them, right? Like,
Maybe.
like why are we paying for these roads since you're the one that?
Well, if you stop to think of how ludicrous it is that the poorest population that makes only 10% of all the money pays 90% of all the taxes. I don't know if that's accurate, but it's something like that. It's very close to that.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah. I think that there's a way that smart people can come together and figure this stuff out. It seems like, anyways.
Right, and the people who don't really need any more money are the people who are fighting the hardest to not pay any taxes. It's crazy.
Or like you said, incentivize them to invest their money in positive things. That seems wise too.
Exactly.
Well, listen, man, you're one of my favorite guests of all time, and I hope you come back and I hope we could do this again sometime.
I hope we can. I really enjoyed it. You're a great person to have a chat with.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
I like talking with intelligent people.
Oh, I'm like that Simulacra. I'm just a faking machine. I'm faking it.
Well, I'm just a retarded guy who's faking being intelligent.
Dude, there's something to that, right? You can fake it till you make it.
Okay.
Well, listen, thank you so much. Okay, we'll talk soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.